ATV-TALK, the podcast. Sit down with your host industry professional, Leonard Duncan, as the men and women from the ATV world bring their behind-the-scenes stories to life. Every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And remember, dream big. It could be your story one day.
Brought to you by Take Two Custom Tees, screen printing experience that is dedicated to quality and customer service every time.
So I want to welcome Bryan Hulsey to ATV-TALK. Thanks for coming on and spending a little of your Sunday with us.
No problem. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate everything over the years.
Well, this is more about you. This hour, this talk is going to be about Bryan Hulsey and his ATV, ATC experience and the things that you've got to do and the changes you've seen in the industry.
Yeah, I have been around quite a while and seen a lot of changes from 3 wheels to 4, 2 strokes to 4 stroke, and handlebars to steering wheels.
Let's go back in time a little bit and talk about your 3-wheeler days.
My 3-wheeler days, the original 3-wheeler days, racing portion was very short-lived. It was one race in '89, the Flat River Grand Prix in Missouri. It's on a Tri-Z 253 wheeler, and it's more of an experiment than really a serious attempt at racing. But that's what gave me the racing bug. And after that was 88. For 89, there was no more 3-wheeler racing. So that was the last race of that year. And from then on, it had to be either 4 wheels or nothing.
Did you do any 3-wheeler riding before that race?
Yeah, I rode quite a bit. Started out on a 110 3-wheeler and just played around for a while. Eventually, I got an 84 200X 3-wheeler and rode that up until about 87. And the Tri-Z was the first bike I actually bought myself.
Nice.
I was in high school and saved up all my money from working part-time and bought myself a 3-wheeler.
Well, you've spent a lot of years racing. I know your name's been bouncing around our shop for years and years. Is cross country been your main discipline?
The first race I ever took my 4-wheeler to was a flat track, a TT race, but it was basically a stock bike, and I was going to race a stock class, whatever they had, and that race got rained out. And as luck would have it, the second race that I went to was a Missouri Hare Scramble cross country race, and I fell in love with the woods ever since. So I really didn't know which one I wanted to do. So it's just kind of how the schedule fell. And after that, I decided I'm just going to build a bike. That's when I realized you got to build a bike for specific racing.
Did you race just locally on the 250R for a number of years before you went national?
Yeah, I did. I raced from 89 until I think 94 was the first time I just dabbled in hitting like Loretta Lynn's, because living in Missouri, Loretta Lynn's was always the close race for us Missouri folk. So everyone always went to Loretta's for the cross country race. And
Loretta's is big, either motocross or cross country. It's always a huge, huge event.
Right. Yeah. Never really had much luck in my early years of going from the Missouri races to the GNCCs, but it was only 1 or 2 a year. And I believe 97 or 98 was my first year that I tried to hit all of them.
Wow. And what class were you racing at that point?
I didn't start racing the first year that I raced all of them. Since I was racing the expert pro level class in Missouri, I went pro at the GNCCs.
How'd you do?
I honestly don't remember my first pro race, believe it or not. I think it was somewhere around top 15, something like that.
Well, as big as those classes were back then, that's pretty good.
Yeah, the pro class back then, it was generally about 30 riders. So it's nothing like today. Sometimes today. I think they got at GNCCs even around 15 or so.
Where do you race mostly now?
This year I've, actually last year in 2019 was the first year of the ATV-TALK series. And that's kind of a Midwest series that it was actually developed as a replacement for the side-by-side GNCC series because they dropped the side-by-sides, the UTVs. So the ATV-TALK started up a pro series for the side-by-side, and they had the quads along with it. So it's an all ATV event, no dirt bike. So it was, and that was more in the Midwest. So I said, let's do it.
How'd you end up that year?
Last year in 19, I didn't set the world on fire, but my consistent finishes, no podiums, sadly, got real close last race, and I got 5th for the year.
You got what place?
I got 5th.
Nice. That's still, hey, you're not a young whippersnapper anymore. You beat a lot of dirt in your day.
Well, yeah.
What's the when you go back through when you started on the 2-stroke? How soon did you have to evolve into a 4-stroke? What year was that?
I stayed on the 250R from 89, the Honda 250R from 89 all the way up until 2002 was my last year on the 250R. And 2003, the only reason I left the 250R was Kawasaki came out with their KFX 700, and I got selected to be a part of that team. So I spent 2 years, 03 and 04, on the KFX 400. By then I was 32 years old, and so I moved to the vet class on the V4 700.
Did some damage on that bad boy. They were a fun bike to ride, didn't they? Weren't they?
Yeah. The first year I had a real good season, and I won that vet class and got 35th overall, starting from about 6 rows back. So on that 700, so I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I got to ride it on the West Coast for Kawasaki in 2004, and being in the vet class, the 30A class, I could only imagine, manage a second place for the season. I just would come up short for that win, and it just seconds and thirds and fourths, and I just could never manage to put her on top of the box. I ended up putting her on the box, in Idaho on the very first Pro-Am race that Works ever had. I got to win that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those Works races look like a good series.
Since ATV-TALK is not the most familiar with woods racing, let's get into some of the setups and some of the things that you had to do to prevent the water from ruining your machine. Well,
most of the machines were being a race type like the 250R and now the 450. It was a lot of trial and error. Some guys would share their tip. Some guys wouldn't. So a lot of times you'd try things that didn't work. Sometimes you'd spot something on someone else's machine. And one of the best tricks I found on the 250R was to run an airbox lid, but a hole cut in the back with a water deflector built in, a homemade water deflector. And on the mud and the water, obviously water and intake into the motor was probably one of the biggest enemies, biggest things we had to battle.
Were the water conditions in the 80s and early 90s worse than they are as the time progressed because the courses got drier, or they became more wore in, or because they don't look as muddy when you look at some of the later footages, they don't seem to have as much mud?
I honestly feel like there's, at a GNCC anyway, local races, they all have their own variety, but I've raced GNCCs through several decades, and it seems like the water has gotten worse. It seems like even on a dry race, you're still going to have water sections. So you always have to prepare for the water in the mud because you're still going to have those sections. at every race. Even if it's dry and dusty, at 90% of the track, you're still going to have that 10% that's not. So always prepare for the water and the mud is what I've found to work out the best.
Yeah, the farther you get in the pack, even if you're a front runner in your class, you're still running in traffic.
Absolutely.
Traffic is the worst thing for the radiator.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's one thing we never had on the two strokes was, these fans. The fans have really helped the four strokes survive races that the two strokes would not have survived because, we can block off the front of the radiator, block off the back of the radiator, and the fan runs all the time. It still pulls air across that radiator, but so you're still going to keep that engine cool. Back in the day of the 250R, it was hard to even block that radiator off because you had to have air across that radiator. Once that radiator got clogged, you're blowing a head gasket, losing your coolant, and your motor's toast.
Well, motor design with solid aluminum cylinders and nickel hard coating also helps with some of the cooling factor with the modern day motors. There's a few engine builders that have adapted like the PC2000 for the 250R that's solid aluminum. I think there's another version of it out there, another solid aluminum cylinder, but I'm not sure what the name of it or the manufacturer is. But you get to the evolution of it. So were there extra snorkels that you would run on that airbox or just the hole in the back with the water diverter?
I still ran a snorkel. At that time, I was running a Lager chromoly chassis, and you had to develop a snorkel system anyway because the stock snorkel system didn't work. So we ran a piece of swimming pool hose around the shock mount under the gas tank, and it actually hooked into the stock piece that you would run. That would just give you a little extra to that airbox, and it was a little more protected air coming from all the way up front. What's that?
Was the performance hampered much by the lack of airflow, or were you guys able to get enough air in there?
That's why we ran that additional snorkel up front, because it just felt like what we had to block off for water conditions, we were just trying to make up for it there. Obviously, it wasn't going to flow as good as the open air box, but better to finish the race than to lead it all the way up to a lap from the finish.
Exactly. So in all of the, you did some OMA stuff too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. In 2008, the Missouri Hare Scramble Series, I think 2005 was the last year that I ran the GNCCs, and I was getting a little older, it was just getting harder to compete. So I stayed local. In 2006, I won the Missouri Hare Scramble Championship in 2006. And I won it in 2007. And for 2008, they dropped the quads from that Missouri Hare Scramble Championship. So we didn't have a series locally anymore. So the OMA series was our Midwest series. And I remember Duncan Racing's Andy Lagston was having some luck in that series. And I raced with Andy for years. So me and a couple friends decided to go hit the OMAs in 2008. And my season didn't start off that great, but it ended really good. And I ended up winning that championship in 2008.
That's pretty awesome. What was the big difference between the OMA and the Missouri series?
The OMA series was, it's always nice to ride against people that you've never ridden against before. So a lot of times in the Missouri series, it just felt like it was the same people I was riding against and racing all the time. And going to the OMAs, it was some people I've known, some people I've known of, and it was nice to race against other people. And the tracks seem to be about 3/4 of the size of a GNCC. I actually prefer more lap, less mileage. So it worked out really good.
Is that because you remember the course better, or
yeah, for me it was a matter of being able to remember the course better. Yeah.
Really? Was the terrain similar, or the same moisture problems that you had
Oh yeah, that's pretty well going to be at any series, the moisture and the wet. And so I learned that from the 250R days was always to always prepare for the wet. And
we always
the terrain, the OMAs were all over. They were up north, up in Michigan. There was real sandy terrain. That was a really good track, all the way up to Spring Creek in Minnesota, Millville, where they have the outdoor national motocross. So we got to run on that track, and they were just all over the place. It was really good getting to experience some places that I've never been before, and learn some new tracks too.
That's awesome. There's a trend here going in our conversation, and it always keeps coming back to water. I don't.
Yes. Water is kind of just something you got to be prepared for with cross country racing. It can be one of the biggest reasons to DNF a race. And I'm not saying I love water or mud by any means, because just about everyone. There's some people that love the mud, but I'm not one of them.
Well,
but with that being said, what's that?
West Coast, and I like dust and rocks.
Honestly, I would rather have a dusty race than a muddy race, because it seems like the mud can end your day. And
the dust can too. It's usually not ending like a mechanical. It's usually ended because you landed on your noodle.
Right. Right. But some of my best GNCC finishes ever have been in the mud. Loretta Lynn's was my best GNCC finish ever, with a 4th overall. And it was torrential downpour the whole race, and I just kept plugging away, and it just seemed like I was making passes on people I've never beat before. So it was just kind of a dream race.
It only takes that one time to pass that guy you never did before to make it a habit, right?
Yeah, and some of the people I passed that day, I've never passed them since.
Well, you got your day, right?
Right. I had it one time.
So when you transitioned from the 2-stroke to the 4-stroke, was it a big culture shock for you as far as the way the machine handled, the setup, things like that?
Well, for me, I know I always had you guys do a cross-country port job on my 2-strokes. I went with big bores and the 310 kits, because I like the power, the down low power and the torque. So for me, really, the 4-stroke actually complemented my riding style, because I actually, even though I was known to be a strong finisher, I tend to get lazy at the end of the race and rely on more of that torque. So I actually like the 4-stroke better, and I really wish that the 4-strokes would have came along earlier in my career.
Well, don't you think the 4-stroke extended your career?
Financially, it probably did, because the 2-strokes were getting hard to come by, hard to maintain, and so yeah, you're right.
But I think it's the 4-stroke's not as hard on your body. I think it's easier to hold on to. There's not as much vibration. Just something about the power delivery. It's easier for our old bodies to hold on to.
Yeah. Like I said, the 4-stroke really does complement my kind of riding style, and it does. It makes me be able to last towards the end of the race sometimes, where I know the high RPMs of the 2-strokes I would have just fell off.
So when we were talking about the cross country thing and you were getting into racing, who were some of the guys at the time that you were looking up to that were the kings of the sport that you were chasing?
Well, in Missouri, I was really lucky to have a real fast guy, Ricky Madison, and anybody from back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, know Ricky Madison. He is the only guy from Missouri to ever win a GNCC overall. He finished number 3 a couple times, I believe. So if I could ever latch on to him at some local races, that's one of the things that made me go ahead and go to the pro class at the GNCCs right away, because I raced against him locally. Not that I ever beat him, but I knew what to expect by racing against him locally.
Well, that's awesome. Was there anybody else that you followed at the time?
Just what I would read in the magazines back then. Obviously, we didn't have any internet or anything, and you wanted to race against the Bob Sloans and the Chuck Palulos and guys like that. You wanted to see what all the hype was, see if they really had it, and they did. Those guys were tough. They were fast.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So when you were reading the magazines, we got interrupted there for a second. When you were reading the magazines, who were you following in the magazine? I remember you were talking about Chuck DeLulu.
Chuck DeLulu and Bob Sloan. I really like Bob Sloan, and Bob Sloan was probably one of the riders that probably drew me towards Duncan racing. I always liked his stuff, seeing your stuff on his bike. And so yeah, it was Bob Sloan, Chuck DeLulu, Ricky Madison was always right in there with those guys. And so yeah, those are the main three.
So did you, I realized that you rode with Duncan for a long time. Did you try your hand with any other sponsors, or have you stayed with Duncan Racing your whole career?
I haven't. I actually, the first time I ever felt like I never felt like I wanted to send out any kind of resumes or anything towards sponsors. I felt like I had something to offer them. So I never tried to get any sponsorship or anything until I put in my first year at the GNCCs for the whole season. And at the end of that season, I finished 14th overall for the year. So I felt that was fairly respectable. So that's when I sent off for sponsorship. Everything was just completely out of my pocket that first year. And you guys were the only performance engine builder and that I even was interested in trying to get connected with.
Wow.
So I got lucky there.
That's pretty good that you stayed with one company for that long. I noticed that on your 4-stroke that there's some decals that have been on there a long time, the same ones.
Yeah. It seems like when I get hooked up with somebody that and I pick my sponsors that I want, or I should say the products that I want. And I have a lot of products on my bike that I use that I could have gotten a cheaper version or a different version elsewhere for either free or a better deal, but I don't like it as much for one reason or other. I don't feel as confident, or I don't like the performance of it, whatever it is. And so I've been lucky enough over the years to go with what I want and have them help me in some form or another. And that's how I've kind of built my race program.
Well, that's pretty awesome. It's something that you got to teach the younger guys, that sometimes that loyalty pays off in the long run to get you down the trail. And maybe in the beginning, it's not the greatest deal, but in the end of your career or in the middle, the deal gets better and better and better.
Yeah. I definitely have been blessed in my racing career, and I can only thank the Lord for that, and my family, and my wonderful wife, Amanda. She's got married last year,
well,
a year ago tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned, have you transitioned from the 4-wheeler into the UTV already? I hadn't seen any post of you racing, so I was a little unsure about that.
Yeah, back around 13 and 14, my local bike shop was J&W Cycles for years and years. They offered me a opportunity to run a 900 XP Razor, and I did that for a couple of years, and it was expensive. Even all the support they could give me, it was very expensive to do. And I just realized it's not gonna. I can't swim in this big pond. So I still have it though. I ended up buying it from them, and I had put all the money into it anyway. So I bought it from them. I still use it every day. I was out riding yesterday. My wife and I went trail riding with my parents, and they have a Kawasaki Teryx, and we do that a lot now as a family.
That's awesome. Is your racing career over, or do you think you're going to go back and hit a few in the next few months?
Well, last weekend was our first race of the year of the AXCC series, and it kind of turned up with this whole COVID thing. We owned the first 3 races of the series, and then round 4, it was off. It was supposed to be at Loretta's, and they called it off. And then a couple days later, they announced that, hey, we got another venue. It's going to be in Oklahoma. So round 1 was in Oklahoma last weekend, and it looked like it was a really good track. I took off, and the mud and the water we talked about, it got the best of me, and I buried my bike this time. It was rider error. It put me quite a ways back, and by the time I dug the bike out, I was so far back, there was no sense in demolishing the bike, so I called it a day.
Wow, it must have been a pretty rough one for you to call it a day, because you're a warrior, and you've ridden through some things that I've read about and seen that I can't believe you finished the race.
Yeah, and that's the thing about a mud race, a real bad mud race like that. Sometimes they fall in your favor, but when they bite you good. So, and you never know what it's going to be like. I remember that Loretta Lynn's GNCC that I got 4th overall. And I remember before that race thinking, golly, this is going to really be horrible. Can't believe it's raining this bad. And it ended up being the best race of my life. So,
everything just flew. Everything was just perfect.
Yeah.
It just worked in your favor.
Yeah, it really did. And sometimes it gets you. Sometimes it comes out good.
Besides that race at Loretta's, is that one of your most memorable races looking back on your time in GNCC?
One of my best races I ever had at the GNCC was, I forget exactly what year it was. I think it was 2000 or 2001. I had another podium attempt going. And Steve Holbert, he'd been around a long time.
Yep.
And another one was Greg Goad. They were a couple of the top guys. And I was battling for 3rd with those 2. And we went back and forth. And it was a really fun race, really memorable race. And at one time, I thought I had my first podium finally. And about 1.5 miles from the finish, we came to a hill, and there were just riders littered throughout. And I went one way and didn't make it. They went over the other way. And I didn't know whether they even got through. So I didn't know by the time I got going if they had passed me or not. And it was just a sprint to the finish, and I realized I got 5th. So they did both get me.
Oh, wow. Heartbreak, but still a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a good one.
What was your favorite GNCC course?
There was a race track in Kentucky. That was probably one of my favorites, and I forget where it even was. There was a auto racing facility not far from it. But it hasn't been on the schedule for probably over 10 years now. But I remember I really liked that track. And that and Loretta's. Loretta's always treated me good.
Well, that's Loretta's either treats you good, or you either love Loretta's or hate Loretta's. I personally never had a whole lot of success there. We tried a lot, but it was just hot, miserable, and never had the clean runs or like we had other places.
Yeah, I raced at Loretta's for a couple of different disciplines. I went down there one year for the motocross, and I built a motocross bike for a while, quad, and I ran the 25 plus class. I didn't win either moto, but I ended up winning my class with like a 2nd and a 3rd. That was pretty cool.
Hey, a win's a win. It doesn't matter how the numbers crunch out.
Exactly. I'll take it.
Was that a GNC race, or was that just a regular motocross?
Yeah, that was a GNC motocross race. So
Wow.
got to watch the pros, Doug Gust, Travis Spader, and them, Gary Denton. It was awesome to get to watch those guys in person.
Yeah, you're dating me because
Yeah.
I was there a lot.
Yeah.
Watch all those guys.
Yep.
Fun days, man. Back they didn't create the sport, but they had a lot of influence on the directions that we are going today.
They showed a lot of us how it's done.
Yeah, exactly. So when you talk about the industry today, and you get to see it from your perspective, just from the ATV point, what do you see happening?
Well, I see a lot of enthusiasm in young riders, but I see a lot of young riders not really knowing what to do and how to get into it. Like I talked about my first race ever on a quad, I was going to a flat track TT race, and I just had a stock bike, and I just wanted to go race. I didn't care what my bike looked like. I see a lot of young guys, I think because of social media, thinking that before they enter their first race, they have to have all the parts, all the goodies. They have to have a bike set up like the pros before they go to their first race, even though they don't have the skills yet to get to that level. I think a lot of people hold themselves back from racing just by not going out and trying it on their stock bike like we did back in the day. How many of us just took our stock four-wheeler to a race, and that's how you determine what parts you need? Okay, I need tougher tires. I need B-block wheels. I say don't be afraid. Yeah, don't be afraid to go out and try it with a stock bike.
Well, I think it should almost be mandatory to start with the stock stuff and work your way into it. Too many times you see the C rider on the line with a pro level purchased machine that they don't have any idea that the monster that's underneath them. Right.
And like I said, I think a lot of times the younger riders, they hold themselves back because they don't think they have the equipment, and they don't know that at that point it's just all about having fun and learning the sport and enjoying it at the same time, and you'll get there eventually.
Well, we can both say we weren't racing for millions here or lots of money for retirement. We've raced for the love of the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, that's the key is I think one of the reasons why I've been around so long is just for the pure love of the sport. I grew up with a dad that was building ATC 90s in the garage to compete. And here we are today on amazing machinery that technology just keeps advancing on.
Yeah. I do wish that the manufacturers would keep developing the ATVs, the quads, like they are the side-by-sides and the dirt bike and things like that. I don't really know what the answer is for that, to get the manufacturers back involved. Like back in the day when Pan-Am had their race teams, KTM was making a race quad, and Suzuki had their race teams. That was, a lot of times they say the heydays of ATV racing was back with Team Honda and Kawasaki on the three-wheelers, but I remember when there was about 5 factory teams out there, and that was incredible.
Well, before that, it was the industry itself that kept it going with
right.
The independent engine builders having race teams themselves and bringing them out, traveling all over the country doing it. And there was no Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki support. It was Duncan Racing, CT,
right.
Curtis Sparks, and a handful of other guys that we were the guys that did it all. We were the guys that carried the load, Lagers,
right.
Rolls, Axis.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like we're back to that with the quads, and folks like yourself are keeping the ATV racing dream alive. You guys are still always continuing development, and a lot of the manufacturers are. The aftermarket manufacturers are keeping the sport alive.
Well, you go through phases where development comes with specific events that happen that allows your company to do development. You have to grow when you can grow and develop when you can develop. And I know my brother Lauren, who owns Duncan Racing, is always looking for the opportunity to develop parts at a cost ratio that's worth it. You race out of pocket. So do we. When you reach in your pocket and you pay for it yourself, it's totally different than somebody handing you a check and a free bike.
Yeah.
What's
I've been on the end of being fortunate enough times here and there to having someone let me ride their bike. I had a performance shop in St. Louis area, Gateway Performance. I was talking about that Lager chassis that I had. He bought that original Lager chassis that I ran, and that was good. It was things like that kept the racing going. Someone helping the racers keep them going. So that's what we needed.
And that's the small little independent guys are what kept the ATV industry going and kept the big guys able to do it, because they would buy a chassis and they would get a guy to come out and race for them. And that's where your depth came from. That's where, it wasn't just 2 or 3 guys racing out there. It was 10 or 15, 20. And that's how you got the numbers, is because your guy that was in the back came from a small series somewhere in the nation and raced a race or raced the series with you, GNCC, GNC, on a machine that he's seen his hero ride. And that company helped him get there, and they believed in their local pro, and some of those local pros became national champions.
Right. Yeah. I wish I could have made it that far, but I had a heck of a lot of fun over the years trying, and met a lot of great people. My dad traveled with me for probably 15 years of my racing career, and that family time together was just incredible. And traveling partners with different friends. You might get some friends that they would go with you for a couple of years, and then I was always the guy that if someone wanted to go try it for a while, well, we know Bryan's going, see if we can jump in with him.
Well, that's and that's what you traveled with Sam for a while and raced with him.
Yeah, my friend Sam Huff.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's still riding or what he's doing. I know he has a son now.
Yep, he's not doing any racing this year with the addition of the little one. So I talk to him every once in a while, try to get him to come out. And I know he's still got his bikes. He ain't given up his bikes yet, but he's young enough. He'll make a comeback.
Well, the start of the family has slowed more than one race career. I'm sure that there was things in your life that didn't allow you to race as much as you wanted to at a given time or now.
Yeah, I've always had little things here and there that some way, somehow, I still found a way to make it to the races. Probably not in the capacity that I should have been. So I'm sure it hurt my performance, but I still always went. That's one thing. It seemed like I always did.
A couple years ago, I think it was a couple years ago, didn't you bring a 3-wheeler out and race it again?
Yeah. One of the years I was going with Sam, we were racing the GNCC series. And at that time now I was in the super senior class, 45 plus years old. And the OMA series we talked about that I'd won in 2008, they allowed me to have an experiment class of a 3-wheeler class. So I was racing the quad at GNCC, then locally at the OMAs, I would race my 3-wheeler. Now that was a lot of fun, getting to race on the track at the same time on my 3-wheeler, racing against all the quads.
How many 3-wheelers came out and raced with you?
All year, probably only about 6 different 3-wheelers. There were a couple of races where I was the only one.
So you were top dog that year.
I was. I won that championship that year pretty well, hands down.
Well, hey, you got to win them. You got to win them however you can, right?
Right. There was a couple races that, like I said, I was the only one, and my goal that day was to beat as many 4-wheelers as I could.
What was the machine that you brought out of retirement?
It was a 85 ATC 250R. And as luck would have it, it had a Paul Turner pipe on it and pipe and silencer. And I bought it that way, just luckily.
Did it have a Type 6 pipe on it or a high rev pipe?
On the ATC, I don't really know. I don't know enough about them to even know the difference.
So just put it together and go ride.
Yeah. I just raced it the way it was, the way I picked it up.
What do you see in the three-wheelers? Do you see many of them coming back at any other time? Because I know there's some stuff on the West Coast where you get to see a few of them pop up now and again. And then you'll have an organized, like a three-wheeler national where they get a bunch of them together. It's hard to put a finger on how many you're going to get and where you're going to get them.
Yeah, there's a small group, small community of dedicated hardcore three-wheel racers. And, everyone knows everyone in the Midwest anyway, in my area. And there's a pretty good following. There's a flat track series, Midwest Extreme Dirt Track, I believe is what it is. It's a TT series, and they have 3 different three-wheeler classes. They have the hybrid class made out of the 450 dirt bikes. They have the vintage class, which is just any stock 2-stroke three-wheeler, and just then an amateur class. So those are pretty good. They generally have at least 20 three-wheelers at every event. So it's really neat.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's awesome too that they can pull that many three-wheelers to an event. I got to go to a three-wheeler race they had here a couple of years ago and experienced. They didn't have that many, but they got to have enough to have a whole day. There was a conflicting event with three-wheelers at the same day, but out here on the West Coast, that was unfortunate. But I still remember my three-wheeler days. My first three-wheeler race in a 200X, I ran over myself.
Yeah, I think we've all done that on them three-wheelers. Yeah, the 200X was a really neat machine. That was fun. That was my first manual clutch three-wheeler. That's what I learned to ride a manual clutch on.
Well, that was a great bike. It was my dad's favorite. That's my dad's favorites of all time is that machine, because he was the engine builder for that era of the success of the company, and he was the owner at that time, and the 200X was a real big portion of that time. Besides, he built the 185S's and the ATC 90s and 110s. So, the 4-stroke, a lot of people don't realize it was 4-stroke, 2-stroke, and now we're back to 4-stroke.
Yeah.
If you had to really think about it, and you go from your GNCC to your OMA or your Missouri series, who was your most fierce competitor? Who was the guy that you had to beat just because he was there, not for any other reason, just because you had to beat that guy?
Well, my most fierce competitor in the Missouri Hare Scramble series for many years was Brian Baker. It was always Brian and Brian. And we would go back and forth. And I believe it was 2 seasons in a row, I finished second to him. But that whole season, every race was back and forth, and it would come down to the last race of the year, and he got me both years. But that was a good couple of years that real fierce battles. Then at the GNCCs, I never was really up high enough that I had any one particular person I had to try to beat. I was a top 10 guy on most days. I always liked to finish in the single digits, and whoever was in the way of doing that is who I had to try to get around. So, and then the OMAs, that first year that I ran the OMAs in 2008, the 2 previous champions were Rob Zimmerman and Andy Lagston. in 2008, he was the reigning champion from 2007. So obviously I wanted to beat those guys. I wanted to win that championship. And after that, there was, for 2009, Kyle Martin, who was another friend of mine that came from the Missouri series. And at one time, there were 3 of us traveling in my truck and trailer that were on the pro row of the OMAs. Myself, Kyle Martin, and another friend of mine, John Pitts. And John Pitts ended up being a Duncan rider with you guys as well.
God, I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yep. He's
How's
another
he
one.
doing? Do you know?
He doesn't race anymore either. And
But is he doing okay?
Couple kids and just kind of moving on with life. I seem to be one of those riders that no matter what life throws at me, I have to still chase a checkered flag. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm wired that way.
I get it. I love going to the races or being a part of it my whole life, whether I'm wrenching for somebody or getting to twist the throttle myself, which, hasn't happened in a number of years.
I understand. I keep thinking this year, every year is going to be my last year. And then there's another reason just to keep going back. Right now, my nephew, Jeremy Hill, he's really getting faster, a lot faster. And I'm really enjoying going to the races with him and watching him beat the guys that I couldn't beat.
Nice. So, now, how old's Jeremy?
Jeremy is 22. He's about to turn 23. And he's grown up for years. He raced on my hand-me-downs. I would have a bike that I'd raced for a few years, and it was now a practice bike. So I'd let him run my bike, and he's old enough, working, and he's paying his own way and got his own bikes now. So that's kind of released a financial burden off of me. But at the same time, it's a blast to watch him get faster, and he's now officially faster than me. So I can admit that.
Going to ask that.
I can admit that.
That's good. I mean, it's not, but it is. The eventuality that the younger kids are going to pass you, it comes, and you just have to let her go. Yeah,
I still can't let go of it though. Whenever last year at the AXCC race at Loretta's, I was in the pro class. He's running XC2, and he was always up towards the front of that XC2 class. And he would catch me, man. I'd do everything I could do to make sure he didn't get away from me. And that race, he caught me at the end of the first lap, and I never let go of him. The 2 of us, I picked up the pace, and we ran together that whole race. We eventually caught the leader of the XC2 class again. He made the pass, and right as he made the pass, he broke his chain. So he ended up not winning that race, but the pace we ran, that was actually my best finish of the year.
You needed to latch on that kid more.
What's that?
You needed to latch on that kid more.
I know. I try to every time.
Wow. That's pretty amazing stuff. You need to have Sam and John reach out. I'd like to hear their stories and spend a little time with them as well.
Okay. Yeah. I'll let them know. Definitely. Yeah. I'm sure they'd enjoy that.
So back to some of your exploits as a racer. We touched on that Kawasaki. I'm sure that some people don't even realize that tank was raced. It's the heaviest production sport quad made. And no, there are heavier ATVs made, 4-wheel drive units, but they considered this a sport quad. Tell everybody a little bit about that 700.
Yeah, that 700 is my favorite bike of all time. I still have one, and I'll never be without one because that's one bike that you can just jump on at any time, and you can use it as a utility, and then you can go fast on it. And so it's just a blast. Being a shaft drive, in 2015, I was only 44, so I couldn't run that 45 plus class. So in 2015, I brought my old 700 out and I raced the 4x4 A class at the GNCC series, just to kind of get my feet wet again. And I had a few wins in that 4x4 A class. Missed the championship. I didn't get to win the championship, but it went from at the very beginning, people, the murmur around the starting line was, what's that guy think he's going to do on that 700? To about midway through the season, people are thinking that I had an unfair advantage due to a solid axle.
Well, I remember at Works, it was hand on your helmet starts, in neutral. Well, that was the click it into drive, put your helmet, your hand on your head. And if you lock the brakes and hit the gas, it locked it into drive. So when you nailed the throttle, it left. There was no lag, no nothing. And I hole shotted. I don't remember how many of the races I hole shotted that year, but I hole shotted Washougal and led it wire to wire on that bike in the pro class. So there was a lot of fun to be had in 2003, 2004 on those Kawasaki's.
Yeah, that was an amazing bike. It was weird how sometimes you felt faster than your 450 riding that thing. Or, back then it was actually, I came off the 2-stroke. So there were times I felt faster on that 700 than I would have been on my 250R. But I think over the course of the whole race, I wasn't. But there we spot.
I think that if you could if you wanted to train somebody to be the ultimate, you'd train them to turn on a 3-wheeler, then you'd put them on a shaft drive machine and teach them to corner on it, because it teaches you to never get out of the throttle. So when I went from the 700 to the 450, my speed through the turns on the 450 was higher than it would normally have been, because I was used to never getting out of the throttle, because every time you did, right, if you hit a rut or you hit an edge, it would throw you over the bars.
Yeah.
So you just stayed in the gas. And I think that helped me win the championship in 2005, when the year I retired from points racing. That Kawasaki was a big help. I did it on a TRX 450R, but I have to thank that year I rode that horse, that monster. Yeah,
it was a monster.
Yeah, it was a great machine. I enjoyed it a lot. I really did.
Yeah, I still have my Duncan Racing exhaust on the 700 that I have.
That's pretty cool. I don't see many of those. I don't know. I think both of mine went back to Kawasaki, and the demand for exhaust for that machine kind of dwindled away. So we took it out of the lineup, but it still is a pleasure to hear one of those go by every once in a while. And I just get it chuckled down deep in there and let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bike that you sure did notice the spots where you had to ride it differently than a 450. And you'd remember that because it would try to kick you.
I remember the scariest thing was if you go into the braking bumps out of the throttle.
Yes.
It felt like you were going to end up underneath it on the front end, where you were just going to go over the bars because it would kick so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you learn how to ride it, kind of respect the machine, right?
Oh, you had to. I missed a double on one and came up short and ended up cartwheeling her down the course, and we brought home a bag of parts, not a bike. Yeah, we had to drag it up into the truck, and it was pretty horrible. And we broke wheel hubs and fenders and fender braces, and we didn't break the frame or the motor, but all the appendages had a problem.
Yeah, I think I've replaced almost everything on them as well. Bent frames and yeah.
Team Green wasn't real happy with us when we sent them that parts bill.
Yeah, Team Green was great. That was a great experience. The whole Team Green atmosphere. Doug Duchette. I don't know if you ever met him. He traveled to all the GNCCs, and we pitted out of his truck.
I didn't get to meet him, but I believe that he did some work on mine in the drive shaft, worm gear in the back where I was eating the gears. And it was because the differences between the terrain you were riding it in and the terrain we were riding it in, when we would come off the jumps and you would be in the throttle, it would eventually eat that gear.
Mm-hmm.
So he fixed a couple of those for me. One of them unwillingly, but still did it. You know. So yeah, we had some good times on that machine. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I still do. I still use that thing as I cut trails when I'm cutting a new practice track somewhere. That's my go-to machine.
It'll take the trees out for you.
Right.
You have to cut them down. You just drive over them.
Right.
So at the end of our talk here and the end of our time here, what is where can your fans find you? I know that you do have a following on social media. Whether you believe it or not, there are a lot of people that watch for your race report, and I read some of the comments, and I see some of the people that follow you. Most of them probably are people that know you or have known you throughout the years. How can they get in touch with you? How can they follow Bryan Hulsey?
Well, the only two social media outlets I have is.
You froze up
my
on
414 tenor, TINNER on Instagram.
You froze up on me there. Can you do that again?
Oh, okay. The only two social media outlets I have is my Facebook page, Bryan Hulsey, BRYAN HULSEY, and my Instagram is 414 tenor, TINNER. I was a sheet metal worker, so that's where the tenor comes from.
Oh, nice. So what do you do, not to change that? What do you do for a living now? Besides
now,
TVs professionally.
Yeah, I wish that paid the bills. You mean what do I do to fund the ATV racing?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, I was a sheet metal worker, and now I am a mechanical inspector for St. Louis County. So now I am inspecting the kind of work that I used to do. So I've been kind of fortunate at that career path as well. So I no longer have to climb the ladders and do the heavy lifting. Now I get to see the other work, or see the work that others do.
That's always a bonus, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a natural progression to move up the ladder.
Yeah. I've been fortunate, blessed life. Yeah.
Well, ATV-TALK really appreciates you spending some of your evening with us, and tell your lovely wife thank you very much for letting us borrow you for an hour. I know that she has to put up with these ATVs and the people in the industry probably more than she wants to some days.
Yeah, she's been very, very good about it. Very understanding, and she enjoys it too.
I'm sure that knowing who you are and knowing you probably as long as she has, that she knew what she was getting into.
She did. Our first date, when we went on our first date, it was a razor ride.
Nice.
So
that's pretty incredible right there.
Yeah. So that sealed the deal.
For you or her? We froze up again. We froze up again.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Did it seal the deal for her or you?
I think it was for both of us.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. That's pretty cool that you guys both enjoy the outdoors and getting to go and do that. I've seen some of your posts on social media.
Yeah.
Again, I just want to say how much I appreciate you taking some time with me. I know you're a busy guy, and I really respect the career that you've had and the things that you've offered our company for some of the feedback that we've gotten from you over the years. And I really appreciate it. I just wanted to say thank you very much.
I want to say I appreciate everything you guys done. I believe it's been about a 22-year relationship that I've run under you guys' banner. And I've been proud the whole 22 years to represent you guys. And I'd like to give a shout out to all my sponsors that
go right ahead. Name some of them.
Fortunate enough to have. Duncan Racing obviously is always at the top of the list. You guys are my longest sponsor and most loyal. V Rubber Tires. I've been fortunate enough to develop tires for them and design tires. And I worked with them for over 10 years. They're kind of they're new to the U.S. about 10 years ago, and they've made some really good products. It's not really taken off in the market that well because I think we went for more of a performance tire, and we lost a little bit of the longevity of a product. So it performs better, but it wears out quicker. Anyway, and then EBC brakes. I mean, when you think of aftermarket brakes, it's always EBC brakes. They're the top. Power Mad. I've been in all of these companies I've been with for 15 years or so, 10, 15 years. And I'm honored to represent them. Even though I don't really get anything from Precision Stabilizers anymore, George at Precision, I've been with him for a long time. JT Sprockets, chains and sprockets, they've been incredible. They make just as good a chains as the other large companies and the less price, which is good. Motion Pro Cables, IMS, Shocks, ARS Effect, Moose Racing. I've been with Moose Racing forever. And Dirtworks Motorsports, they make suspension linkage and a few other little one-off products. So I just want to say thanks to everyone that made my career possible. And thank you for having me on.
Thank you, bud. And I appreciate it. Save some time for me in the future, and we'll maybe get a group of you guys together with you and John and Sam and sit down and give me some inside scoop on some of those truck rides that you guys took. You know, the razzing, whoever didn't beat who got on the way home.
Yeah, it'll be good.
I'm sure I'm going to get some stories out of those too.
Yeah. All righty.
Thanks again, Bryan. ATV-TALK, really appreciate you spending the time with us. And I know I've said it 10 times. I just really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, bud. You have a wonderful night. Thanks a lot, bud.
All right. You too.
Talk to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The team here at ATV-TALK would love your feedback. Please email us at hello@atvtalkpodcast.com.
Duncan Technologies International. More than 33 years in the industry building racing programs and ATVs around the world. We build winners.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, don't forget to rate us on all the available platforms and share us with your loved ones. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more ATV Talk news. See you next time.